it's Tourism Month, and joining us in studio to take a look at the sector in South Africa specifically is Michael Tatalias. He's CEO of the South African Tourism Services Association. Thanks so much, Michael, for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Well, according to the latest update of the World Tourism Barometer of the UN World Tourism Organization, we've seen worldwide international tourism during the first half of this year rising 4.5%, and certainly sub-Saharan Africa hasn't done badly. We've seen 9% increase in tourism our way. How is South Africa in particular faring right now?
Well, we're holding our own, is as best as we can put it. I think in fairness, it'd be said this is probably one of the toughest years we've had. And it's one of those, I know it's a bit of a cliche after the movie The Perfect Storm, but as an industry, we're quite advanced in that we deal with a number of markets. And we're not totally reliant on one single market. But the problem is we're seeing problems in all of the markets we're trying to deal with. So in international leisure, people only travel if they feel confident, if they've got the money available. And you've seen with the international markets happening in America and all that kind of stuff in Europe, quantitative easings, all those kind of things are putting things under pressure. And most long-haul travel, particularly for a leisure destination, is booked by the woman of the family, because it's sort of usually for a romantic destination where she'd like to go and spend some me time with the husband and whatever. That's also the most conservative partner in the relationship, who then, when things get tense, wants to put money aside for a rainy day. So you see a bit of a conflict there on the long-haul booking. So we are still seeing people coming, certainly in the high end, coming through to the very expensive game lodges in Botswana and around. There's still an appetite for that. But again, people don't want to be seen to be flashy anymore. The mood's changed. So bling and whatever is not really the flavor of the month at the moment.
It's within that context that we've had very interesting comments come through from the Southern African Tourism Association, saying that South Africa needs to start positioning itself a little bit more aggressively as a value for money destination, and that within this context that you're highlighting, if it's to sustain its international appeal. What kind of stride are we making in that regard?
Well, we are trying to do it. We are put under pressure inside South Africa with so many cost rises that are putting pressure on the basic product. If you think about it, the Seckam prices going up, the municipal rate structures, and some of the hotels in the urban areas are paying up to 1,000 Rand a room a month in rates alone. There's all sorts of duplication costs. So the cost pressures building on the industry are high, while at the same time the customers are asking us to find the value for money. What we've got to be very careful to do, and that's what the industry is trying very hard to find the right balance, is to get a balance between value for money and not too cheap. Because if you go into straight rates cutting and cheapness on that sort of process, then you risk devaluing the destination itself. And then people come back in 3-4 years' time and they don't want to go up, push the rates up again. So you've got to get the value for money, what it is that they're looking to do, and sell that rather than try and compete. Because as a dollar, we're a lot stronger, the rand is stronger than the dollar. There are a lot of competing long-haul dollar countries who are able to cut rates because the dollar has been so weak up till now. So you can't really play the cut the price game with Thailand, because they can outcompete. So you've got to add more, look for value, make sure it's family friendly, that you can do kids. And that's the one, we go back to the lodge example, where we've seen the big buyer from a game reserve kind of experience is the 12-year-old who watches National Geographic. Yet, up until much more recently, most of our private game lodges wouldn't take kids, yet they're the ones who want to buy the product. So you've got to try and make it family friendly, and that for a big market like India, for example, is critical. You've got to be able to take families. So we are having to adapt and offer more and make it more adaptable to everyone to see what they want to do.
How successful are we at targeting the non-traditional markets? Because going through the latest stats, growth in tourist numbers from Europe was up 4.5%, and it's certainly that territory that's still contributing to bulk of tourism arrivals into South Africa.
Funny enough, despite all the problems, the UK and the US are still producing quite good numbers, but nowhere near the growth numbers we need to do to see and sustain our plans. If we looking at our plans, we've said as an industry, worked with the Minister to produce the National Tourism Sector Strategy with some very ambitious goals for 2020. If you look at where we are this year, what we're producing isn't going to get us there. We've got to be doing substantially better. So we need to find other parts inside those traditional markets and find ways of getting them to come out here, but also to work on the new ones. Now, we are seeing positive trends out of China. South African tourism's done a lot of good work, and it's a sort of an investment market. They've won 17 different awards since World Cup last year in recognition inside the consumer parts inside China. That's great. It's starting to turn into visitors. We're seeing a lot of growth coming out of India. But both of those we challenged by, when we're working with Home Affairs as an industry, to try and sort out the visa problems. It's all very well going into a new market, attracting a whole lot of attention if you can't then fulfill and give them the visa that they need to travel. So
especially where, you know, as you highlighted, we've got these ambitious targets in place. They want to increase tourists visiting this country from 7 million in 2009 to at least 15 million by 2020. How much of that target market is the African market? Because that seems to be what's letting us down in a very big way. Africa's contribution to South Africa's number of tourists was disappointingly low over the first half period.
But the figures there we've been trying to work out, and those are very realistic figures, and that's good, because we've been trying to separate the cross-border shoppers from the genuine ones who are coming to spend overnight and come and shop, do medical, whatever the reasons are that get them here. Yes, you're quite correct. That's going to have to form the majority of the people who are going to come through to us. We are doing a lot of work, and we're working with the SA Tourism and the government departments to try and identify ways of talking to those communities, because there is value to be had there. They do spend in dollar-based cash amounts, so they're happy to spend so long as you get the value and they felt welcome. But when you're, again, in the background, looming in the mind of any time you're going to approach them about Africa, is all the xenophobic outbreaks we had a number of years ago do play in the background of any discussion you have with groups there. So you do have to work on making them feel more welcome, and that we actually really do want them and respect their business.
Absolutely. So some work needing to be done there. If we break it down slightly further, looking at domestic travel, I mean, on Friday we saw the successful launch of Santaco, and that airline said to be producing a whole new market in terms of who's going to be using the airline space moving forward. How do you see that contributing to an enhancement of the domestic traveller?
I think it's quite an exciting new development. Whether they pull it off or not, that's the whole free market concept. Interesting enough, in a domestic airspace concept, we've had open skies since 1993, and because of that, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of passengers, really dramatic passenger numbers through all the airports and to all sorts of cities, while keeping the land transport going through. So that's a positive trend. What the Santaco guys are saying is people want to be able to get a crown now without having to spend an entire day travelling. They want to get in 2 to 3 hours to where they want to get to. What we've had as a problem with the domestic air travel is to try and get people to the airport, because the old design during the apartheid eras, however you want to look at it, it's not intermodal. You had to have a car to get to an airport. Railway lines didn't get there, bus routes didn't go there. Now with the car train going to Oliver Tambo, that's a start, because you can get a metro line to the Rhodesfield Airport. What the Santaco now opens up is the taxi community driving people from township areas to airports, this case Lanseria. Well, that's exciting, because now we can get more customers to the airport, so they got more time to travel, and that should open domestic travel dramatically. The real trick for domestic tourism going into the future is how much cash the consumer's got in his pocket.
Actually has to spend. Well, it's certainly...
That's under pressure.
Absolutely. Well, it's certainly something that we're going to be monitoring in terms of how it changes the dynamics of this industry as a whole. Thanks so much, Michael, for joining us this afternoon. Of course, Michael Tatalias is CEO of the South African Tourism Services Association.